work for me. The only thing they do is comply with government regulations. That's it. Nothing else. And if I didn't have those 7 people, I would probably have another 100 people that actually were productive. And the real sad part is, the regulations that exist today, they didn't exist when I got started. And if they did, I never could have got started. I couldn't have afforded it. It would have been impossible for me to start my business if I had to encounter all the regulations that exist today. I mean, my legal bills today, on a yearly basis, are more than I used to earn 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago. And I don't have any, it's not with customers. None of these are customer issues. This is all just compliance. This is all trying to comply with the regulators so I can stay in business. It costs me a fortune. And I'm sure other small businessmen are encountering similar problems, but we didn't have a financial crisis because there was not enough regulation. We had it because there was too much regulation. The government interfered with free market forces that would have prevented all this from happening. They said, oh, Wall Street was greedy. Well, they're greedy. They've always been greedy. But what was different about this time? Why did the greed get us into so much trouble? It was because the government took away the fear. The government made it possible, right? George Bush talked about the fact that Wall Street was drunk. And there's no question that they were drunk, right? The whole country was drunk. Everybody on Main Street was drunk. Look at the prices people were paying for houses. They were all drunk. The question is, why did they get drunk? How did the country all of a sudden get drunk? It was because the government liquored them all up. The Federal Reserve poured the alcohol, and people drank it. And when you're drunk, you do a lot of stupid things. And when you sober up and you realize all the stupid things that you did, that's a recession. That's when you start to fix the problem. But the government will never allow a recession to run its course because it's not good politics. So what do? They try to pour more alcohol so we're drunk again and we don't realize what a mess we're in. And that's the point we're in right now. So, I'm going to wrap this up and then take some questions. But if I can get elected, and I think I can, and I think I'm the main candidate, I think I'm the only candidate of the 3 running as Republicans who can beat Dick Blumenthal. Right? I mean, I don't think he can beat me. I know that he's way ahead in the polls. Fine. That's because nobody really knows anything about him. And I'm kind of low in the polls right now because nobody knows me. But I think as that changes, he's going to come down. I mean, who is he? He's a politician and he's a lawyer. Nobody likes politicians. No one likes lawyers. He's both. Meanwhile, the state of Connecticut is a fiscal disaster. He's been there for 20 years. He's been the number 2 ranking official, the Attorney General, for 20 years. The state is a basket case. Look at his one department. Look at how many lawyers are working for him now compared to when he first got started. So what's his expertise? Send me to Washington because I specialize in growing government? The other thing he does, he files lawsuits. Great. Send him to Washington. We need more lawsuits. Right? We're going to sue our way to prosperity. That's his plan. Right? How can he beat me? I'm going to do for the country what I did for Connecticut? That's not going to work. What did he do for Connecticut? All he did is grandstand. He's like a Jesse Jackson. He sees something popular and he jumps on it because he's just trying to get popular because he wants to run for senator. Well, he thinks it's his turn, and you don't become senator because it's your turn, right? I think that I can beat him. I think I can beat him in the debates. I think at the end of an election between me and Blumenthal, he won't be able to get elected dog catcher in the state of Connecticut. He'll be done. So, and if I get this nomination, I know this is a real. Somebody asked me about. I don't know how many people saw the debates. Anybody? Okay, that's so. Because I said 10 times the amount of people were watching Jeopardy. So. Instead of the debates, but one of the things they ask is, if you go to Washington, what are you going to do to be bipartisan? Are you going to try to get rid of gridlock? And my answer is, first of all, I don't want to end gridlock if that's the only thing that's standing between me and more government. I mean, I'd take gridlock over Barack Obama's agenda any day of the week. But I'm not going there to try to compromise. Right? Compromising is what got us in this mess. I want to win this ideological battle. I want to turn the tide in Washington, not just over the Democrats, but in the Republican Party, because the Republican Party has sold us out. Look what we did under George Bush. Look at the big increase in government spending under the Bush presidency. It was worse than Lyndon Johnson. He didn't veto anything in his entire first term. Then he finally did veto something in the second term, but it wasn't even a spending bill. So, I would have vetoed everything. There wouldn't have been a single thing I would have signed if I was the president. But I look at even the Congress. They went along with all these budgets. So I want to change. I want to win that ideological battle because we can't afford to lose it anymore. And we can't compromise. We can't accept just a little bit more government. We already have too much. We can't accept higher taxes. They're already too high. They have to come down. But we can't reduce taxes until we shrink the size of government, because that's what government costs. It's not what it taxes, it's what it spends. And we have to bring it under control, because we don't need all this government, and we never did. We made it to this, we made it for a long time. But wait, I mean, how did we make it even? We had half as much government 10 years ago. We were still here, the country was here. The country was here 20 years ago. The budget keeps getting bigger and bigger. Meanwhile, at one time, 20, 30 years ago, we were the world's richest creditor nation. Now we're the world's biggest debtor. We had a high savings rate. Now we have nothing. We had a huge trade surplus. Now we have a massive trade deficit. We were the most efficient manufacturer of goods in the world. We were the lowest cost manufacturer, despite the fact that we paid the highest wages. Now what do we manufacture? So what has all this government bought us? It's bought us unemployment. It's bought us debt. It's lost us our freedom. It's lost us our liberties. We've got to turn that around. And that's what I'm going to do. I said, there's no other reason for me to be there. I'm not there because I've got some kind of political agenda. I'm there because I'm fed up and sick and tired of it. I've been spending my whole career trying to protect my clients from those ridiculous decisions made in Washington. I'm trying to protect my wealth from the mistakes made in the Federal Reserve, made in Congress. Well, I'm tired of doing that. I'd rather go to Washington and stop them from making those mistakes in the first place. And if you elect me there, that's what I'm going to do. And if I get the Republican nomination, when you guys go to the polls, I know it's happened in the past because it's happened with me. You go there and you got a Republican and a Democrat, and you vote the Republican because he's the lesser of the two evils. You're not really voting for him, you're just voting against the other guy. But that's not going to be the case. Right? Anyone that votes in this election as a Republican is voting for me. And if I get there, I'm going to do exactly what I say I'm going to do. The problem is the other Republicans that we sent in the past, maybe they say the right things to get elected, but they never do those things, because once they're elected, forget about it. All they care about is staying in office and getting reelected, and shrinking government is inconsistent with your desire to remain in office. Because to stay in office, you got to grow that power place, you got to play ball, you got to go along, and you got to check your principles at the door. I'm not going to do that. If I was going to do that, I wouldn't even be running. Anyway, thanks for listening to me, and I may ask any questions you have on any issue that there is. And I'll answer any question. Nothing?
If you were elected, what would you do with the TARP money that we've gotten from the federal government?
Well, first of all, there is no TARP money. It doesn't exist. It's just money we're borrowing.
Right.
So it's not like there's this big slush fund here, and if we don't spend it on the TARP program, we have it for something else. We never had it in the first place. So, I was against TARP when they first proposed it. The very first time they proposed it, I was on national television saying, it's no good, we shouldn't do it, it's not going to work. Even the way it was originally proposed. Linda McMahon in our debate said that she supported it in its original form. No, in its original form, it was a disaster too. It couldn't work. The whole idea was that the federal government was going to buy toxic assets from the banks, and then at some point in the future, sell those toxic assets and make a profit. And I knew that couldn't happen, because I knew to buy those assets from the banks, they would have to overpay, because I knew the assets were practically worthless, and so if we bought them at a price high enough not to bankrupt these banks, that we would lose a fortune on the deal. And even though the Secretary of the Treasury convinced Congress to vote for this nonsense, it was all a big bait and switch, because the minute they got the authority to do it, they did something completely different. See, I would have seen through it. I knew the guy was full of it. When I heard about it. The problem is there's not a single member of the Senate that knows anything about economics, that knows anything about Wall Street. I know both, right? I could have told the other senators that he was full of it and to vote it down. And that's what we need. Linda, I've heard Linda McMahon said that, she would have supported it because the Secretary of the Treasury said we needed it. I know enough to know we didn't need it. Right? I know a lot more about economics than the Secretary of the Treasury. And I understand where he's coming from. And I know, a lot of the things that were done, Wall Street is feeding this information. They've all got their friends working in the Treasury Department. All these ex-Goldman Sachs guys are working there, and they're feeding them information to bail out Goldman Sachs. If we didn't do all these bailouts, Goldman Sachs would have gone under. I don't care what they're saying right now. They would have failed. And the crazy part about it is, Goldman Sachs was responsible for 20% of all the subprime mortgages that were securitized. They were the biggest securitizers of subprime mortgages. And what they did is, when they put these packages together, they knew they were toxic, because as they were selling them to their clients, they were betting that they were going to fail. And they placed their bets with AIG. And basically they had insider information because they knew it was crap, because they packaged it. And so they bet that the stuff they were selling to their clients would fail. And when it did fail, and then AIG went bankrupt because they couldn't afford to pay Goldman Sachs, they went to Congress to get a bailout for AIG so that AIG could pay Goldman Sachs. But without that AIG bailout, Goldman would have failed. And without the Federal Reserve slashing interest rates down to 1%, they would have failed. You know how much liability these Wall Street firms have? You know what a massive cut to their expenditures they have when interest rates go from 5% to 0? You know how much that saves Wall Street firms that are leveraged 30-1? It is a massive, massive subsidy for these investment banks. And you know where the money's coming from?